Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of Maximum Octane. This week, I am very happy to have a special guest, Mr. Scott Brown, with me. He is the owner and operator of a new business, which you'll have to check out. The website will be on the show notes of Get Level 5 Solutions. And so you'll be able to find that at getlevel5solutions.com. And then also Cardinal Plaza. And so one of the reasons that I asked Mr. Brown to come on today is not only is he very innovative with his businesses and thinking, I hate the overused expression out of the box, but Scott, you truly are a solution person. If there's not enough hours in a day, you create them somehow. I mean, you find solutions for everything. That it just is so inspiring, and just I'm so in awe of that because you don't let anything stop you. And so part of why you're able to do this is the team that you have built and how you have empowered them over the years, because without a great solid team, it's pretty hard to be an entrepreneur and be able to be a visionary if you don't have the boots on the ground, right, to implement those things. So I wanted to chat with you a little bit today about empowering your team. So thank you for joining me today.
Awesome. Thank you, Kim, for having me on. It's always great to talk with you. Cardinal has always been a really successful shop, especially when you look at it from the outside. Our reputation was always strong and clients were happy, and we've had great people for their entire careers. But the problem was that running that particular shop was exhausting. Controlling everything from the top down is doable, but it's not sustainable, in any sort of long term. And, what the problem is, really it was a trust issue. And if I'm responsible for every decision and every purchase and every hire and every policy, then I'm accountable for all of that. And, at some point I realized, it only took me, half a century, but that the world really can't be predicted. It can't be controlled. And trying to have a job description for every person and an SOP for whatever's going to come up, I consider that to be a loser's game. And so I wanted to find another way. And for me, totally decentralizing the business model and empowering my team was the way. And, if you're here expecting, the same old shop, my shop is different than any other shop that you'll ever find. And so it may frustrate some people because I think I will probably tell you some things that you may not have thought of or may not even agree with. And so I'm just going to say, these are the things that work for me at my shop.
So, there's already people saying, what? You don't need SOPs? You don't want a job description? He's crazy.
I don't have a job description. I don't have SOPs. I don't even have an employee handbook. Consult your lawyer before you. There's no legal advice or whatever.
Is this that thing? Don't do this at home, kids. But maybe.
But my goal is to empower the team as individuals and to decentralize the entire organization. And I really do encourage your listeners to think about everything about how and why you do things. One of the things that I did was, I explained to the people that work for me, the team, that they don't actually work for me. We all work for our client. And then recently I've been doing some research, trying to decide, the best ways to allocate capital. And I decided to do a dive into the most successful CEOs of the past 70 years. And guys like that you may not have heard of, like Henry Singleton and Tom Murphy and Peter Thiel from PayPal and Bill Anders from General Dynamics. Tom Murphy is Capital Cities, which, he ended up owning ABC and ESPN and all those sort of things. And it was neat because all of them agree, while they're older than me, I guess I agree with them. They have extremely decentralized their management and try to have lower overhead and then work from there. My goal is always to have the team all be pulling in the same direction. So we want to maximize the strategic alignment, at the same time minimize all the red tape in between the people. And it's crazy because everything's so uncertain. with the pandemic and everything else, and everything's volatile. And these things can force you, if you're not careful, back into like the old controlling ways of the past, the top down ways. We manage, and a lot of this, honestly, I learned through ATI, based on a rigid set of values that I use like guideposts. And so long as any member of my team doesn't violate any of our 3 guideposts or any of our promises that we make to the customer, they will never be in trouble. So my goal, it's not, empowerment isn't so much about something that I give to them. It's about something that I was just thinking about this when I was preparing to talk to you. It's about something that I take away from them. And that's the fear of failure. And, so I want those guys just to work courageously. And believe it or not, that's a learned skill, but it's also a contagious skill. And so, our guideposts are that we want to make our clients' lives easier. Customer comes first, team second, and the individual third. And then the third one, which is really our overarching mantra, is to be grateful for everything and entitled to nothing. And so as long as we're, firmly in those guideposts, those are our guardrails. There's nothing they can do that's going to get them into trouble. So, people talk about, who we are, or, how do I attract my guys? Because honestly, I don't have any trouble attracting employees. We typically have dozens, used to be 50 or 60, but now it's like dozens that apply every time that I have an opening. I don't think I've had to post an opening in forever. But we're looking for grinders, guys that are happy, when the work gets hard. Not that they're not superstars, but I'm not out hunting for an ATEC. I'll turn them into ATECs, and then we'll put them down at the solution shop. And it's not that they're not superstars; they are, but they're grinders first. So I keep talking about, and you can break in anytime, but otherwise we'll run out of stuff that I prepared. But we're talking about decentralization, and all that is, to me, and it's different in different industries, but it's just the way my business model is organized. All the daily operations and all of the decisions that happen, I push them as far down into the organization as I can. They'll go all, because it frees up me and Chris and the managers to make more major, business changing decisions.
So let's talk about that for a moment, because I know there's probably people like stressing out right now listening, like, oh, I just put all the decisions and I decentralized, management, and everybody, is running around. I'm sure they're thinking just running amok and doing whatever they want to do. So when you talk about putting those guide rails around them, I mean, there has to be some kind of can they make give a customer a refund, or, what kind of things are we talking about that they have autonomy that they can just do because they say, is this good for these 3 pillars or pieces?
Yeah, they can actually do all those things. They can make a refund. They can.
Do you have a dollar amount? So let's just take that piece for a minute. So do you have a dollar amount that without anyone else's approval, you can make refunds up to $500 or $1,000 or whatever it is, or you just leave it completely open?
We leave it open, because as soon as you put rules in, then all of a sudden I'm putting my own judgment and my own values in place of theirs. There's a concept. It's kind of, you've got the way that we've always done it in the past. We've got thinkers on one side. That's your service advisor, that's your owner, that's your comptroller, or whoever you have up there making decisions. And none of them are in operations. Those are not the guys actually doing the work. So then you got the workers, and they're the guys that are changing the oil and answering the phone and driving customers home and changing tires. And those guys are the workers. Or we're going to say those guys are so dumb that they can't think for themselves. We got to have the service advisor to think for the guy in the base. Of course not. That's absurd. Are we
No
going to say,
thinking
oh,
for you. I'm thinking
I,
about like that Seinfeld episode with the suit. No thinking for you.
yeah, no soup, no soup for you.
No soup for you.
But it's and it's the same thing. Let's say we had a mistake, and that happens. It happens in my shop. It happens at everybody's shop, and a customer's unhappy. Um, the service advisor or whoever's talking to him can do whatever it takes to make that guy happy. And sometimes it's a refund. Sometimes it's an explanation. Sometimes it's, hey, I've got to turn you over to Chris. He's not going to be here till tomorrow morning. Where can he reach you? Because they may not have all the answers. But they're able to, yeah. And as long as they're doing those things, I'm never going to get upset with them. We'll talk about it later. I even have several of the guys, not every single person in the employee, but there are at least 3 or 4 credit cards that I've got floating around with the technicians or with the light service guys or with the service advisors, so they can buy what they need without having to get approval from me. And the neat thing is they are so much better stewards of my money than I am. Every once in a while, we and then we'll talk about it after they make a purchase, and something goes wrong, because I think I was on another podcast, and this had just happened, and we had bought a scan tool that we already owned. Just because they didn't realize, and so we had to work on our communication a little bit, so that on a purchase like that, and it all works out. I mean, it's the new tool's more updated than the old tool, or whatever. Right? I thought it was a funny thing, and yeah. So, I mean, in either you're going to do this or you're not going to do it. But honestly, the guys that we have working for us, and girls that we have working for us, we have both, are so much better equipped. And this is probably a good point I can talk about. And this is a kind of a neat concept that I've been thinking about, and honestly haven't even 100% introduced it to my team. We're doing it in practice, but now I'm going to do it in words, because I had to come up with words for our discussion today. And that's defaults versus standards. So if you've got a standard in your office, like a SOP, a standard operating procedure, that'd be your set of practices, your methods, your tools, your products that you use to complete a certain task. And I've got no problem with that. But the problem when you have a standard is that you're going to want to enforce that standard. And that's going to be counterproductive. And the reason why, I mean, standards are great. They give you a reliable way to get a particular job done. But the problem is they undermine judgment and initiative among your team. So instead of enforcing the standards, I'm thinking of them more as like a default. So you've got a new employee, because we hire all our employees 17, 18 years old, and then we develop them up. Well, they're going to need that default at the beginning, until they've achieved mastery of a particular process or a particular repair or a maintenance thing. But then all of a sudden, hey, they can't, if you've never done something, doing it the way that you're trained, that makes sense. But once you're a master, that's when they should feel free to think outside the box and maybe come up with a new way to do that same repair that's going to be a little quicker, a little easier, a little more reliable. And then all of a sudden, so your standard has changed. Your default has changed. And so, you've got to give them freedom, to do that. And honestly, freedom to make mistakes. And so a lot of times, when this process is going on with a new employee, it may take hour and a half, 90 minutes to do a 15 or 20-minute job as they're learning, as they're working down that learning curve. But then all of a sudden that 20-minute job is taking 12 minutes, because, they've taken all those things that we taught them, and now they've put their own individual brain to the job, and they've come up with a better way. And that's how we talk in our team. We have to have certain words, language that we all agree on. And that's the only way that you can do this. You have to be able to talk to your team. And if I say leadership or responsibility or mental toughness, they all have to know exactly what we define those words together. And one of the words we define is constant performance improvement. And that is how you get your performance improvement. It's not from me saying, hey, I got this new tool, let's do this way. And that happens sometimes. And I'd say usually most of our failures come from me. And honestly, most of the successes, almost all of them, come from the team, and then we celebrate that guy. Hey, way to go, Jason, you thought of a new way to do this.
New way to do something.
And, it can be something, super mundane, but, but they're all, going at it with the same attitude, again, grinding and, trying to come up with new things. And we give them the freedom to do that. And
so
we give them the freedom to fail.
Obviously there has to be some non-negotiables or some standards, like what hours you're open or different things. How do you, when you thought this up and you followed some of the masters in business over the years and said, I want to try this, how did you sit down and say, these are the things that are going to sort of be non-negotiables or SOP that we have to stay true to? We can always discuss them, but this is the parameters for this. And then the rest of the stuff is all up to you. I mean, that seems like a lot.
Yeah, being available, certainly hours of operation are a key thing. So it's 7 a.m, we've got to be there. We have certain guys come in even earlier than that in order to get the shop open. But we're a bedroom community, so our rush hour starts a little earlier than the enclosed suburbs. So we're here. Somebody's here at 5 a.m. Somebody's here at 6 a.m. Technicians typically start at 7. When they finish, really, that's more of a function of how the day went. Parts availability, authorization availability, things like that. So they will fall out at the end of the day, just depending upon how the day's work is gone, and that part's kind of up to them. As far as schedules, like one of the things, I try to do whatever's going to be in their best interest. So when we were in the pandemic, I cut them into 2 teams, so in case there was the virus,
somebody got sick
shop,
on one, or right,
we'd only have and so I paid them for all 6 days, but they only worked 3. So I had team A and team B. And as we were coming out of that and I wanted to bring the team back together, I'm like, hey, this is working really good. Let's go to 4-day weeks and keep 2 teams. And that honestly would have been great for the shop, the mathematics of it. And I said, but we'll only do it if everyone agrees. And it was about 60-70% that said that would be a good idea, but it wasn't all of them. So we didn't do it.
So what would be a reason that somebody said, Coach, put me in 5 days, I don't want to only be in 4?
I think that change is, and again, when you're going to something like this and you're going to, listen to your team and you're going to love your team, it's a change and people don't like change. And, so one thing that you have to do is, you have to make sure that, like, when you're talking to anybody and that when you're critiquing or challenging the work, but you have to make sure that they know that you care personally about them, before you're talking about anything, and certainly, about anything like change. Like I was meeting with our insurance broker today, and our health insurance is coming up, and it changes almost every 12 months. And that's always it's an anxiety filled time for the team. And, we're always going to do the best insurance that we can get, but you're limited. There's only like 6 options in Virginia. I know some states only have 1 option, in which case there's no decision at all. But, but it's but as it changes, it's not up to us. It's just something that people don't like. And it's the same thing with this. Some people don't want to take a decision. Sometimes there'll be certain people that I've never gotten a request. Hey, do you think this makes a good idea to buy this equipment? And I'm like, I don't know. I'm not using that equipment. Go talk. Some people will do that. Some people don't. Some people will research it. Some people, and it's okay, because everybody's their own, individual person. And, so it's, so we work with them as individuals. I mean, we know that from taking the CPP tests, everyone's different.
They are.
And,
I want to circle back to something you said, though, because
sure.
I want to make sure that the listeners heard it. when you split the team in two for precautionary measures with COVID and trying to figure out the logistics of if somebody, in one half of the crew were, got COVID, then how would we preserve and still keep going some of it? You mentioned that you paid them for their regular schedule. And I want to talk about that for a moment, because sometimes business owners, we talk a big game about, empowering our team and putting people first and caring about, our internal customers and all of that. But then when it comes down to something like that with dollars, we're like, all right, we're going to have them work 3 days, but we're cutting their pay. And the effect of, I bet you paying them for all of the days, even though they weren't there, probably put so many mulligans in your bank account for goodwill and to show them that you really care about them and their families and everything that's going on. I mean, just that piece of it. What was the reaction when you said, we're going to cut your work week in half, but I'm going to maintain your current pay schedule so that no one gets hurt by this?
Sure. What our goal was that whatever the people made in 2019, we wanted to guarantee them that amount for 2020. And and I'm sure they like that. I mean, back then everybody was scared. I was nervous. I was scared. Thank goodness the PPP came along. That made it really, really easy, because that's exactly what that money was designed for.
Right.
I know there are a lot of shop owners that furloughed people or laid people off or closed their shops and still took the PPP money. And
A lot
honestly,
of businesses, not just shop owners, a lot of,
no, yeah, no, I
yeah,
mean, but the shop owners are the ones I know. And honestly, everyone's got to make their own decisions. And I don't know that I'd have been comfortable with myself, had I done that. I never really had to get to where I had to make that really, really tough decision, because the PPP bailed me out. I'd made the decision and announced it before that, but it really made it easier on
made it
me. So,
easier.
so I'm not going to pretend like I'm any big hero or anything, but the guys worked so hard and they worked so well. And honestly, I know that we've swapped some emails about inflation. I always tell my team, we get together sometimes just to talk for a few minutes in the morning. And I tell them, this is the same thing I told them during the pandemic, is I told them, don't go home and watch the news. I said, don't go home and read the newspapers. I said, unless you like to. I said, I will do all that for you. And when there's information that you need, I'll tell you. I'll tell you when it's time to worry. And we did a lot of communication within the team. And I've never written so many emails in all my life. And I would write them nearly daily. And they would go to the people that work for us and to their families and anyone else who wanted it. There were certain customers that wanted them. And I would tell them exactly, what my thinking was, at any particular time. So there were never any surprises for those guys. We really, really communicated well. I did the same thing. We sell gasoline, when the Colonial Pipeline got ransomware, and I did that, publicly. So I would tell the people, hey, this is what's going on. This is what it looks like supply wise. Yeah, it's time to fill up. Just recently, we've been making arrangements for the shop. I think honestly, the inflation situation has got a chance to be much worse for us as shop owners than the pandemic ever was, if you can even believe that. Hopefully it's not. Hopefully but either way, I did, talk to the guys just recently, and I'm like, hey, it's time to start putting away, 2 to 3 months worth of food in order to have food security. And we recently updated that to now the new recommendation for those guys is, 4 to 6 months of food, at their house, non-refrigerated, that will, allow them to be food secure. Again, we're not panicking or anything, but I just, I figure that's part of my job is to be, the Paul Revere for these guys. We've adjusted their pay, because of the inflation and things. And we have a process that we do so that it automatically happens. And hopefully we're keeping up, or slightly, yeah, we're just slightly behind, I think, inflation as a whole. But we have a plan, and it feels a lot. So it was nice. I was able to say, hey, just like the pandemic, we're all going to pull together, and nobody's getting rich, but we'll all come out of this well on the other side. And so it seems like so we haven't lost anybody since the pandemic began. A couple guys went away to college, but I don't really consider, but nobody's left the industry or left for another shop. So that's been pretty gratifying.
When you do things as you do and really put your people first, like paying them when they weren't working their full schedule, or making sure that you're keeping up on what's going on in the world so that they don't have to, or ensuring that they're staying whole during inflation because of increases and those things, that creates such a circle of trust, for lack of a better way to describe it. I mean, that they trust that you always have their best interests at heart. And so when you make these changes and empower them to make decisions and all of that, I think it makes a huge difference that they look at you as a model and they say, Scott's always doing the right thing for us and putting us first. And so we need to do that with our customers and, sort of pay it forward. And I think that's part of like your success there, is that there's just a trust and a respect, and everything is transparent. Do you feel the same?
Yeah. And part of it is, you've got to be like, one of the greatest things that I ever did, and I always try to give credit, if somebody, probably Lee Weatherby from my 20 group, but they said, hey, Scott, why are you hiring people? I'm not working with them. And I got out of the hiring business, or the firing business. Honestly, we fired like 3 people in over 50 years. So that doesn't happen. But but I had Chris and Cam send them through the hiring firing class, and now it's Chris and Dan, and they just do a great job. And so now, to identify the people that are grinders, we talked about that before. It's basically, I want people. This is all I ask for, though, because remember, we're hiring these people young. I want them that love the work, that love the people that they're doing the work with, and that love the shop itself. And if we have those 3 legs of the stool, then everything else works out great. I mean, I'm able to take a Dan, and in Virginia, we have this thing called the emergency temporary standard. That was our COVID instructions, but now that's been made permanent. So now it's the permanent temporary emergency standard. And he's in charge of it. And I don't have to worry about it at all. When somebody comes in, he does the training, he does he takes care of the whatever checks we have to do. John is all on top of inventory, because that's what I've given to him, and I don't have to worry about it, because he worries about it for me. I'll worry about current events. They take care of everything else. And
well, but what you've done by removing yourself from that
Mm-hmm.
equation and putting the power on the end user, right? Because that's one of the biggest things I think all internal customers, when we gripe about where they work, whatever business or shop or wherever, they say, oh my gosh, they only came in and put all these things in, but they're not the ones that have to implement it. We go in, we put this stuff in, and we don't think about how will the end user be affected by this. And so you're putting the power in the hands of the end user and saying, how does this work? What do you want to put in? You make the choice.
It's what you described as kind of like a thinker doer problem. When someone's coming in and imposing a standard from on top.
Right.
I mean, think about you own a coffee shop, and you got one barista and you got one cashier, and the cashier handles the money. The barista makes the coffee. Well, who takes the orders? Does the cashier take the orders and then also ring them up, or does the coffee maker take the order and then make the coffee, or does it change when it gets busy? Maybe the coffee maker's making the bottleneck changes. Those 2 guys can work it out together much better than somebody in Seattle, Washington can impose any strict decision. So being decentralized, it just makes sense, because it allows the decisions to be made quicker. It allows the capital to be allocated more dynamically. It's just maybe they decide, oh, I need a second register so I can do two at once. Well, they make that purchase decision. You talk about, there's a lot of shops or a lot of businesses, and I'm not banging on ATI, but I'll bang on ATI a little bit. Big on having employee meetings, big on one-on-ones. And they'll think nothing about calling a shop meeting, and those are super, if you do the math, super expensive thing to do. Even one-on-ones are a very, very expensive thing to do. And then, they're complaining because they have to purchase a new floor jack. Oh, can't you get by and, we'll slide a cinder block under the car, but before the jack starts to, lose its pressure. And yet they're having all these expensive
I'm having
meetings.
ocean nightmares right now, but go ahead.
Yeah, no, what I'm saying is buy the floor jack.
Buy the floor jack.
Yeah, I mean, like a good one-on-one, it's going to be, if it's providing feedback, if it's offering a chance to create some collaborations or deepening a relationship, that's wonderful. That's a one-on-one. If it's politicking, it's a forum for complaining. If any other unmet need comes up during the one-on-one, it's an inappropriate waste of money, waste of time. It's a wombat, waste of money, brains, and time. It's just, I think a lot of times those sort of things just highlight like the hidden dysfunctions in a business. Sometimes it's a great idea, to go ahead and have a shop meeting, but they should be, I think, infrequent, and they should always have a purpose. You leave the ego at the door. The entire focus of any collaboration in between two employees, not even including the management, but just any two employees that are working together, is to get better. And the work is discussed, not the workers, if that makes any sense.
Oh, absolutely.
And in that case, those are great. You can never get as much information, per minute as you can during a big team meeting. During a one-on-one, I think it's just, I think we got to be careful. And another member of the 20 group, he had a great idea. He's like, pull the Band-Aid off, so you're empowering all these people. And so someone's going to come and he's complaining about a coworker during a one-on-one. And he's like, well, let's talk, let's bring that other coworker in and let's talk and get it all squared away. They don't need the owner. They don't need the manager to get those sort of things work. They can work that out themselves, and they will, if you give them a chance. And, so I just said, that's just a dysfunctional one-on-one meeting. And so, so we're working hard to have the meetings that we should have. And the fact that other shops are successful and have tons and tons of meetings, that doesn't mean that I want to have tons and tons of meetings.
Well, I think that's where you have to know your team, and you have to know what's effective for them. And when people have meetings just for the sake of meetings and they don't have anything really to discuss or something that's going to come out of it, to just meet, to just not have anything accomplished is a big waste of time, or as you called, a wombat, for sure. And that's understanding your team and what's important to them as individuals, right? And what they need, because there are some people that need that and like that one-on-one total attention. It's just about them. And there's some people that don't need that. And you have to be aware of all of that, for sure.
And that would be a reason to have a one-on-one, is if that's going to help you deepen your relationship. So if that guy needs that, then by all means, you want to give the guys and girls, give them whatever it is they need, to be successful. And it is going to be different for different people. I mean, that's if you coach a basketball team, you learn that right away. We talked earlier about, defining words, and it's neat because, like, a lot of times that'll be what our one-on-ones are. We'll say, hey, what do you think about mental toughness? How would you define it? And the definition that we came up with as a group is, it's just having the ability to have the discipline to go after the next most important thing. So if something good happens or if something bad happens, being mentally tough means you put it behind you and go on to the next thing. Just answer the bell. Bell rings 8 times, you answer it 8 times. Same thing with, like, leadership. People have all different definitions of leadership. Our definition of leadership is to make those around you better. So it's the ability to help them be more productive. One time we were doing, um, we were checking numbers, and I tend to look at numbers more than I should, just because I'm always curious. And it was like, hey, this one guy is not being as productive as the rest of the guys on the team. And I said, okay, well, how is Jason doing? How is CJ doing? How is Brian doing? These are the three guys that are around that guy. Oh, they're all lights out. They're doing amazing. And I said, why don't you watch him for a day and tell me what? And he's helping all the people around him. So it was hurting his individual numbers, but it made the shop better. So all of a sudden I realized, wow, that guy's a leader, because that went into our definition of that. And, so it's a, so it's more than just numbers. When it comes to having your people be empowered, you're empowering them to help each other. Honestly, when I say I haven't had to fire very many people, the people that like us tend to really like the things that we do, and the people that don't tend to select, another place to go work. And honestly, that happens very rarely. It does happen, but for the most part, the guys just do a wonderful job. I mean, we've really been working to get younger, because all of a sudden I had like 3 or 4 guys that been with me more than 30 years. And I was like, oh my gosh, our shop's getting old. And, so then I'm like, Chris, Cam, let's start looking. And that's when we started hiring the very young people, and they're awesome. The best. Yeah, I like my team more now than I've ever liked them.
That is fantastic.
And that's really fun. Yeah.
Well, wonderful. So before we close out today, I need to ask you, what's an unproductive habit that you had that you exchanged for a productive one?
Well, I can tell you unproductive. I am a procrastinator, and I will say that I tend to start many more projects than I finish. I have got all over my desk, projects that are 80% done, 90% done. And I haven't exchanged that for anything yet. So I am looking for ideas on how to force myself to get better. I know that I'm trying, what I'm trying to do is to limit, the number of initiatives that we're working on at any one time, so that, if I'm asking, hey, Chris, I've got an idea, or hey, Cam, do you think we ought to try this? I try to limit that so they only have like 2 things they're working on at a time, because I think beyond that, that seems to be doing a little bit better. And I'm trying to, there's this school of thought called a lean startup, where, and this is kind of what we did with the level 5 solutions, where instead of having the entire business model built out, we had a couple things that we knew how to do. And so we opened up and we were doing those things. And then our entire business model has been built out over the last year, really based on interactions with with our clients, with our independent shops that use us, or the collision shops, or the glass shops, the dealerships. And if we had waited until I had done 80% of each one of these tasks, then we still probably would not be open. But I didn't realize that doing that, we did it by accident, but it's an actual real thing, called a lean startup, I think is what it's called.
I think that's
and
what it is.
So I think I'm trying to leave a little bit of my, I don't even know if procrastination is, or just lack of follow through, or what have you. I'm trying to leave that behind in order to, just be more customer focused, and get pushed, letting them push me through the design process of whatever it is I'm trying to do.
That is fantastic. Well, thank you so much for joining me today and sharing, your wealth of knowledge and experience with us. And I hope you will be back with me in the future to talk about some of the other great things you do and how you're always able to look ahead and do things a little non-conventionally. So everybody stay safe, make good choices, stay inspired, and I will see you next week. Bye-bye.